Next question. What will you do to address out-of-state license plate offenders? And will you establish an actual system to catch these offenders? Or do you think there is no way to enforce this law? And if so, is it fair to residents who register their plates properly and pay their share?
No, it's not fair to residents, but no, there is no legal ability on the town, on behalf of the town of Bethel, to enforce that. And I want to make that very clear. The best thing that could possibly happen is if the state of Connecticut would say, this is such a pain in the neck, we're going to just do away with taxing automobiles as personal property. Because the assessor's office has no legal right to enforce that. They can't do it. The police department cannot enforce it. All they can enforce is if a registration is expired. And you may have noticed there's one of our police cars that has those weird little black cameras that point off the back of the rear deck. Those will catch cars whose license plates or registrations have expired. They're more than 30 days expired, and they'll be pulled over and they'll be given a ride home and their car will be impounded. But in terms of the taxation, the only thing our assessor's office can rely on is if a citizen calls up and complains and they say, hey, I saw this car at such and such an address and it's got a Vermont plate and I see it there every day. And what the only thing the assessor's office can do is send them a tax bill or send them a form, a letter, and say, we understand you have a car. Here, the state law says you have to do this. And I can tell you, you know, sometimes we have people who come from out of state, they're visiting for a while. Sometimes they're visiting for a month or more. You know, we had a lady whose mom came from Florida to stay with her for about 6 weeks while her daughter was recovering from surgery. Somebody complained, the assessor's office sent out a letter, my phone rang, and they were hopping mad. You know, what an unfriendly town. You know, my poor mom comes to help me out, and I get this rude letter. It wasn't rude, by the way. It was just said, you know, do you live here? But this is the kind of thing we struggle with. And I can tell you that we could reduce headcount in this building by at least 1 or 2 if our staff did not have to deal with that issue of personal property on cars. It's really a nightmare to enforce under the best of circumstances. But no, if anybody's telling you that the first selectman is going to get out there and enforce that, no, they're not. There is no legal authority to do that.
Well, two comments on that. One is there are requirements, I'm sure, to prove where you live. That's number one. I think it's something like more than 6 months. I might be mistaken. And the other thing is, for people who have children, if their children are registered in Bethel schools, wouldn't that sort of prove that they live here? For the school year, anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So isn't that a way to
Well, the first
it?
thing you said is not a town issue. That's a state DMV issue. That's, you know, that all goes through DMV and not the town of Bethel. Well, like I said, if somebody comes and registers kids in the school system and they have a car that's not registered here, the assessor's office is not going to know about that until somebody complains. They don't, you know, somebody posted something, I think 1 or 2 years ago on social media, that one of the employees in the assessor's office was out and, you know, they were incensed because they were out inspecting cars. The lady takes a walk at lunchtime. They don't have the authority to go do inspections. Plain and simple. We have no enforcement authority. Another thing that people need to know is that sometimes people have to have their cars registered out of state, and they still pay Bethel tax even though it has an out-of-state plate.
And why do they have to?
Because, well, an example was a gentleman I know who has a condominium up in Vermont, and he has a trailer that he keeps up there for lawn equipment, and I think he's got ski-doos, things like that. So he uses this trailer. He doesn't use the trailer down here. So in the state of Vermont, to get a license plate for your trailer, you have to license a vehicle to tow that trailer. So he has a vehicle.
Okay.
You know, he lives, 10 months out of the year in Bethel,
Right.
But he has a vehicle that has a Vermont plate on it. So he's a good citizen. He's never skirted the law on this. He fills out they call it a DEC form, a declaration form, once a year. Says, here's my vehicle, here's the Vermont plate, here's my tax for it. He pays the tax on it. I can't tell you how many times people have called up that office. I see that vehicle with the Vermont plate. It's there all the time. we have no way to, there's really no way to satisfy that. But the answer is really that the state of Connecticut has to come up with a different way to fund local government, because that's a really lousy way to do it.
Okay.